Tell us a little more about how you chose this place, though. It's hard to, as you read in this wonderful passage, it's hard to come right to the origins of the personal spur for the journey. But how did Mount Kailash come to you?
Almost by chance. An Indian friend told me years ago that she had viewed this mountain from a distance and said, "You must go there." I put it in the back of my head thinking I'll never go there. But after my mother's death, and after all, at my age, it's nothing very surprising that you have no parents or even siblings left. But there was this visceral need to go to somewhere to take action of some sort, almost as if you want a breathing space between what's happened and what future you have. And I wanted to go to my instinct was to move, do something, and to go to somewhere holy. And I'm agnostic, and to go to Jerusalem, say, or Canterbury, would have seemed in some way inappropriate, these places where God is supposed to have walked in history, which require a sort of dogma, maybe to substantiate your pilgrimage to them. It did not appeal to me. But Kailash, I remembered being described as an object of holiness in the landscape. Of course, it's holy to 1/5 of mankind. Every Buddhist and Hindu regards it as the center of the universe in many ways. But it was possible to think of it in terms of simply a very beautiful, very remote and strange holy object. And it's that appealed to me, that I was going to somewhere that was outside my own history.
I was going to say, because, excuse me, as you mentioned, Jerusalem and Canterbury, but for all you say that you're agnostic, those are places that are, I would venture, are still connected. Here we are in Asia House, but those are places connected to the West,
yes,
and to a certain cultural inheritance, whereas this place didn't have this.
Yes, that's absolutely right, and there's a sort of enigma about my whole motive in this way. After all of us from a Christian tradition have a certain view of what we would like to believe of the afterlife. We wish for the survival of personal memory, personal character, even individual appearance. These things are promised to the Christian revelation. And I was going without this belief, but with this nostalgia, if you like, back in my culture, but going towards a mountain that was holy to people to whom this individual survival is irrelevant. In Buddhism, as an old Tibetan monk told me, there is no soul, there is no God. It didn't even describe it as a philosophy. He said it's a science. In meditation, Buddhism is a pure science. So this offers no comfort to somebody from our Christian tradition, which makes quite an enigma of my own journey, that I'm going with this nostalgia for something I no longer believe, towards a mountain that is sacred to a people whose tradition also holds out no hope of what we think of as individual survival.
And where you see also, and you confront in the book, a wholly different attitude, not just to the soul, but to death and the ceremonies that surround death, too. Tell us a little. You encounter the sky burials.
Yes,
called.
I never saw one myself. I suppose Tibet, at least in the eyes of the West, Tibetan culture, there must be many of you here who know at least as much as I do about it, but certainly in the Western perception, Tibetan culture is thought of as a death-haunted. The only Tibetan text anybody's likely to have read is the Book of the Dead. And sky burial certainly is one of those things that feed into our fascination and perhaps bemusement with the way the Tibetans approach death, because they don't, the ground is frozen hard. It's extremely hard to bury anybody, and it's never been in the tradition. And the tradition has been that you feed the dead to vultures. You carve up the flesh, or it's done by a sky burial master, a special profession. They carve the flesh up, pound the bones, and the vultures assemble in a special place. And the body effectively disappears. They regard the vultures as sacred. We tend to think of them as scavengers. Tibetans call them sacred, and they believe that they only defecate in the sky, and that when they die, they say you never see a dead vulture. When they feel they're going to die, they fly up towards the sun until the wind takes them apart. So both vultures and dead disappear.
Just disappear.
I went up to a plateau under Mount Kailash where these performances take place. There was nothing there but icy wind and people's clothes and hair blowing about. They left there as sort of hostages for their death almost. And a few vulture feathers. And eventually I came to a place where, surprisingly, I found the arm bones of a human left under a board. They should have been fed to the vultures. The idea is that if there's any part of the body left unfed to the birds, it gives access to demons into the body. So this was a very unusual, I think, and very careless skymaster, to say the least.
But it's a very different attitude, as you say. Than
It is. I think they regard with horror our interment of the dead into the earth. And one can understand it through their eyes, that it seems to them a horrific thing to do. They do it sometimes to the diseased and to the criminal, so that they feel their kind.
Punishment.
Yes, it's almost as if they think their kind will not be reincarnated if they are buried in the earth.
It's in the passage that you read, and you remark in an offhand way, I would say, it's my profession, after all. And yet, was there a tension between, as you said, this is a very personal journey. This is quite a departure for you. Was it difficult to change your way of working, to take yourself in?
Yes, in a word, it was. It sort of nevertheless happened automatically. And as I was undertaking the journey, I wasn't even sure it was going to become a book. I was my habit is to take notes as I go along, and I was still doing that. But I thought probably that it was a short journey, that it would not become a book. And then as I was doing the journey, of course, I had my family in my mind, so things were reminding me of them in my own experience or even in the landscape. And these passages intruded almost into the narrative as I was writing it. They were painful to write, and I thought as I was writing them that they would be irrelevant. Quite likely they were rather too maudlin or just not anything I wanted to divulge in a book. And so I told myself, well, I'm going to write these. They're painful, but I seem to want to write them. And then when the manuscript is complete, I'll very likely just excise them. But when I came to the end, they had their place and were important for the narrative, I thought. So there they are.
Again, we've talked a little bit about this. The world, traveling in the world, has changed a great deal since you began writing. We can now look at a place like Mount Kailas on Google Earth. How has that changed things for you, for readers of books? Do you feel that impinging upon you in any way? How does it affect that profession?
Difficult to say. I think it must have done, of course. I think travel writing is a very flexible medium, and that it can accommodate a great deal of change. I mean, I can conceive travel books in the future as very much dealing with the underlying reality of a country or a culture that may be superficially westernized. It'll be another role for the travel writer in a way, because although our world does seem to be homogenized superficially, it only is very superficial, and we've learnt this politically at our cost, to imagine that you can impose Western values on other cultures that have their own values. And that may be a function of travel writing in the future, to look underneath the surface. At the same time, just as one country becomes available for exploration, so another becomes occluded. I can remember back in the late 70s, I did a journey by car, which people were doing at that time, through eastern Turkey, through Iran, through Afghanistan, Kashmir, northern Pakistan, a journey that would hardly be possible now. But at that time, the whole of the Soviet Union and virtually the whole of China were inaccessible. And it seemed to me they would never in my lifetime become available. And it never occurred to me that countries like Afghanistan or Pakistan or Kashmir were not going to be open to me. So it's always changing.
On this journey, you didn't, of course, you speak Mandarin, which was received, I think, with a bit of some hostility in Tibet, and Russian. How different is it for you when you can't speak with the locals?
Very different. I always feel a reasonable confidence going that certain things will be in place. You know, you research a country, you know its history is there, you know its buildings are going to be there, you know its landscape's going to be there. What you don't know is who you're going to meet, whether it's going to be remotely interesting or revelatory, and that's always been the tension for me. Am I ever going to make contact with people, even with the language? And in this case, I had a Sherpa with me who spoke Tamang. He was a Tamang, which is a Tibetan minority, a Nepalese minority whose language is supposedly close to Tibetan. And I took him on purpose as an interpreter. I don't like interpretation. I'd much rather have it immediate. But when he came, he couldn't understand a word of anything anybody was saying. The dialects are so extreme in Tibet, and this is a very remote part of western Tibet where Mount Kailash is, that he was as bewildered as I was.